The one that's had the biggest impact on my life was trichotillomania, which is the fancy name for hair pulling disorder. The urges are really strong, and I remember one day trying to resist the urge, and it felt like I was drowning, and I really wanted to come up for air, and I couldn't do that. Felt like there seemed to be something missing for the longest time. Even as I learned these different strategies and the treatment recommendations, I still really had a hard time putting them into action. And finally, I realized that the missing piece for me was acceptance and self-compassion. For any behavior, we get a benefit. I often say we don't repeat any behaviors that don't serve us in some way. So if we are coming back to a behavior over and over, it's because it serves us in some way. Even if we don't want to admit that they're regulation tools, that's still how they serve us. Willpower it's very similar to white knuckling it. Willpower is, I've decided that I want to change this thing, and out of sheer determination, I'm going to approach it that way. And I find that rarely works. In the times where it does work, it's not a long-term solution. When we say I can't quit, that closes all the doors, right? Why even try? If it's in your mind that you can't quit, then you're not even going to put forth an honest effort because you've already decided that you can't do it. But if we shift that around to, I haven't been able to quit yet, we leave all those doors open. I spent so many years thinking that me pulling my hair out was a character flaw. I thought it was a character flaw for so long that I would love for the younger version of myself to know that it's a messenger, it's trying to tell you something.
Hey everyone, it's Sophia from Sacred You. Thank you so much for being here. A quick message before we dive into today's conversation. You may have been watching the podcast videos but have not had a chance to hit that subscribe button. So if you have ever gained value from our videos, from our conversations, it would mean so much to us if you would hit that subscribe button below right now, or even just give us a like. And what that means is not only does it allow us to grow our subscriber base, but it allows us to bring in more important guests for you to listen to. And you will be one of the first ones to be notified. So please hit that subscribe button and let's get started on today's conversation. Welcome to the Pathways to Wellbeing. My name is Sophia from Sacred You, and with me today, I have the absolute honor and pleasure of chatting with the beautiful Laura Hope. Welcome, Laura. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you because it's a topic that is really prevalent in today's world. A lot of people that I know of in our community and that I talk to really want to change habits, but we tend to sabotage ourselves without even really realizing it. And you're a behavioral transformation coach who help people quit those unwanted habits and step into a place of confidence and self-trust. I love that. Or can you just share, let's start, what first led you to explore this whole path of helping others break free from their unwanted habits?
Like many coaches out there, I ended up here because this is something that I have struggled with myself. And so my habit, and I've had certainly many of them, but the one that's had the biggest impact on my life was trichotillomania, which is the fancy name for hair pulling disorder, where people with trichotillomania, or trich for short, compulsively pull their hair out. I don't like to say that we can't control it, but it's very difficult to manage it. The urges are really strong. And I remember one day trying to resist the urge, and it felt like the best thing that I could relate it to was it felt like I was drowning and I really wanted to come up for air and I couldn't do that. And so, just to give you an idea of how intense these urges can get. And so, I ended up here because I've dealt with this on my own. And I started pulling my hair when I was about 12 years old. And I kept it a secret for a very long time, about 20 years. I kept it a secret and didn't tell a single soul. I didn't tell family. I got married. I didn't tell my husband at that time. And so there was so much shame for me, so much shame and secrecy and it was a battle not only internally, but also externally to try to fix my hair in a way that people couldn't tell that I had bald spots. And so I've taken a lot of time trying to learn strategies to manage these behaviors and going to conferences and retreats and doing trainings. I'm also a physician assistant in psychiatry. So I also have a psychiatric practice where I treat individuals with this and other conditions. And so I've done a lot of those trainings. And I felt like there seemed to be something missing for the longest time. Even as I learned these different strategies and the treatment recommendations, I still really had a hard time putting them into action. And finally, I realized that the missing piece for me was acceptance and self-compassion. And so when I started to bring in acceptance and self-compassion with all of these other tools, these recommended treatment strategies, that's when it really started to fall into place for me. And I'm here because I want to teach others what I've learned and that missing piece that it took me so long to find. I want to speed that process up for other people as much as it can be sped up. Obviously, a lot of this is personal journey, but to help hand that missing piece over to other people.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Really, thank you for sharing that. And if I may just take a moment just to really honor you for being so vulnerable and sharing that, because it happens in our world. And even if it is pulling your own hair out, which I have heard of before, or other behaviors, other things that are sabotaging us, I just like to honor you,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
really. And even today's world, not only do we have those issues that can stem from, as you said, a lack of self-compassion, a lack of
Mhm.
self-love, and we're punishing ourselves for whatever reason. We also live in a world where we get so distracted, so easily sabotaging ourselves. I was talking to
Mhm.
someone, if I can say, I used to meditate for 4 hours at once. Not a problem. But that was before the digital age.
Mhm.
Now it is so easy to get caught up in these things.
You're so right.
Yeah. So, like I said, just thank you so much for sharing it. And a lot of people don't even realize that when we have a behavior, but it crosses into a habit and a bad habit or a habit
Right.
that's sabotaging ourselves,
Yeah.
how can someone really tell the difference between a quirk or something that really needs to change?
That's a great question. And I believe that it comes down to the cost benefit balance. So, for any behavior, we get a benefit. I often say we don't repeat any behaviors that don't serve us in some way. So, if we are coming back to a behavior over and over, it's because it serves us in some way. And I know people can always come up with examples of how about this is a terrible habit and there's no way that it serves me. And truly, most of these are regulation tools. Even if we don't want to admit that they're regulation tools, that's still how they serve us. And so I believe that when it crosses from typical behavior that is in our service to an unwanted habit that we really want to be free from, it is when the cost of it outweighs the benefit. And so if we say that the benefit is often regulation, what is the cost of that? For me, I had bald spots and it was really impacting my self-confidence and I had a lot of shame. And so even though it was bringing me some regulation, the amount of regulation that it brought me wasn't enough to counterbalance all of the shame and time and energy that I was putting into it. And so I think that's true for anything. I often talk about how a glass of wine for most people isn't a problem, but drinking every night, that's going to drain your energy. And popping a pimple in the mirror, that's probably not a big issue, but getting stuck in the mirror for hours, because some people do that. Some people with skin picking disorder get stuck for hours. That steals your time. And so when we're trying to sort out, is this just a thing or is this habit that I want to handle, that I want to do differently? I recommend looking at what is the cost. And if the cost is really big, then it's probably something to find another strategy that doesn't cost so much.
Mm. It makes sense, doesn't it? And a lot of times we don't even realize, especially with time, we don't even realize how much time it is costing us
Yes.
until afterwards. And it's what happened? Where did the day go? Yeah, yeah,
And
totally.
I think to speak to the technology that you mentioned just a minute ago, I think that even robs us of our time even more. I actually just put an app on my phone not too long ago that blocks certain apps at certain times of the day and limits the time because it really draws us in. And yes, it is a big time issue.
They're huge because the time seems to go by so quickly when you're
Mhm.
focused on
Yes.
whatever it is. It could be totally
Mhm.
sabotaging what you want to do, but
Yes.
if you're focused on whatever the habit is, then time.
Hmm.
And the unfortunate thing is you never get that time back. Never get. I'd love to ask you about willpower.
Yeah.
A lot of people seem that they feel like that they're failing if they can't really just use their willpower. Like I can just stop it myself. All I have to do is put the device down or stop whatever the habit is. And but why do so many people feel like that they fail when they can't? And how does willpower work in all this?
Yes. And so willpower, just to throw out my working definition of willpower, is it's very similar to white knuckling it. Willpower is I've decided that I want to change this thing, and just out of sheer determination, I'm going to approach it that way. And I find that rarely works. And in the times where it does work, it's not a long-term solution because these behaviors serve a purpose. They, like I said, often are regulation tools. And so they're there for a reason. And so if we're just going to try to use willpower with this behavior, we are leaving this empty gap of this need for regulation. And so that just doesn't go well. We have it there for a reason. And so I really like to talk about let's set the willpower aside and let's start bringing in other strategies so that we don't need the willpower. Let's regulate with tools that we feel good about so that we don't need to white knuckle our way through it and really fight these urges. And so I think that willpower often fails because it's not really addressing the issue. It's not addressing the underlying issue. It's just putting a band-aid on top of the problem.
Hmm. Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to go into the other strategies, but it's so true. Because how do we address those underlying issues? A lot of times we have emotions that
Mhm.
we don't even realize are there. We have suppressed a lot of emotions, whether childhood emotions, anything that's happened that we've suppressed and is now affecting us in our lives today and sabotaging us in our lives today. So how can we unlock or uncover those emotional undercurrents that keep us trapped?
Yeah. And first, I want to call out that I often find that people address emotions like an inconvenience. It's almost like it's inconvenient to feel sad, or it's inconvenient to feel bored, or whatever the emotion is. So often people want to set that aside or sweep it under the rug, and they don't want to deal with it because it's just inconvenient, it's uncomfortable. And so I think one of the strategies is leaning into those emotions and letting those emotions be there and hearing what those messages are that our body is trying to tell us. And I think that's where this regulation starts. It's almost like if you don't have an idea of where you want to go, where your destination is, it's going to be really hard to get there, right? If we don't know what emotions are underlying everything that is contributing to this need for regulation, then it's going to be really hard for us to address those emotions if we have no idea what they are. So, for many people, step one is addressing this idea that emotions are something inconvenient that we need to get around, and instead lean into the emotions and listen to them and understand where they're coming from and get curious. And then, as I said, bringing in other strategies to help manage those emotions and help process those emotions. But rather than trying to push it away, leaning into it, which is such a paradigm shift for many people.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And definitely just the way that we see our emotions, that they're not all bad, that they're there to help us, they're there to give us a message and to help us grow. Thank you. What are some other common traps that people fall into when we really want to change a habit?
Yes. One of the really common ones that I see is people try to make these big jumps and changes. And while I am all for lofty goals and making huge strides, I really encourage people to take it slower, take it smaller early on, and I encourage people to focus on achievability early on. I say, let's take our eye off of the end result for just a minute and let's look at what's the next step that we need to get there. Let's start there. Sometimes I talk about setting micro goals. What's the smallest goal that you can imagine that's working in the way, working in the direction of your bigger goal? And let's start there. And one of those traps would be starting with too big of a goal. This can also lead to people giving up too quickly. They'll say, oh, I tried this for a week and it didn't work. And I know you had talked about meditation earlier. Meditation is one of those things that I recommend often. I can't tell you how many times people come back to me and say, oh, I tried that, it didn't work. And you just say, what do you mean it didn't work? Because meditation can't actually not work. It is the practice of noticing, of focusing your attention. And so it can't not work. And talking about how do we start working that into their practice in a way that feels manageable and doesn't feel like it's torture to sit there for extended periods of time. So that's a big one that I see. People try to take a really big step and then they get frustrated that it doesn't happen quickly enough and they throw their arms up and say it doesn't work and move on.
Yeah, and thank you. And it's so very true. A lot of people don't realize that just by sitting there and your mind is racing all over, that's the first stage, is the first step to meditate. You're meditating. You we just got to
Yes.
develop the ability and slow the mind down, which happens over time. It's not going to
Mhm.
happen like that.
Yeah.
Talking of developing abilities and allowing time for things to happen to help us to overcome habits, what's a very first step someone can take if they feel really overwhelmed by a habit and really don't know where to start?
That's a great question. And I think it comes down to two different categories. The one that I think is most helpful is, as we just mentioned, leaning into those emotions. And I guess more specifically, asking the behavior, what are you trying to tell me? Or if you're uncomfortable talking to the behavior like that, asking yourself, okay, what do I need right now? Am I tired? Am I hungry? Am I lonely? Am I bored? What is going on right now that is bringing this behavior up? And I say two things because I think that's one, but I talk to plenty of clients where that feels too nebulous or heady, or it's not concrete enough. And so I do think that's important, but I think for any listeners out there who feel like that is not concrete enough, then my concrete recommendation would be start adding in other tools, whether that's meditation or mindfulness or spending time outside or taking a walk or calling a friend, whatever it is. Start practicing adding in other regulation tools so that we decrease the need for this behavior that is helping us regulate that we don't want anymore.
Yeah. And even like I said, even if it's just calling a friend, a lot of these habits distract ourselves and
Yes.
sabotage what we're trying to do. But one way of overcoming is distracting from that habit.
Mhm. And I'm so glad you bring that up because I often talk about two different types of tools, the tuning out and tuning in tools. And so the tuning out tools are distractions, maybe calling a friend, maybe watching TV, maybe doing something on your phone, maybe doing a puzzle, things like that. Those are all of the tuning out strategies. And then the tuning in strategies are meditation, mindfulness, journaling, maybe doing a mindful walk, doing a body scan. Those are the tuning in strategies. And so I tend to think of these as the tuning out strategies are like the basic first line, like before you've really built up that muscle, so to speak, to cope with stressors. The tuning out strategies are perfect. They're easy to get to. But I encourage people to start sprinkling in some of the tuning in strategies. So, sure, we don't want to take away the tuning out strategies, but if we can get a bit more of a balance or have some of those tuning in strategies along with it, that tends to give us a really good variety of tools that we can lean on. So, I'm glad that you brought up distraction because I think distraction can be really helpful in the beginning. And I think there's also hopefully a more long-term goal of getting into those more advanced tuning in strategies, which can be incredibly helpful.
Mhm. I like that. I like that. Thank you for sharing. It's tuning in and also
Mhm.
tuning out, depending on what the need is. But to have
Yes.
both, and like I said, to have a balance.
Yes.
It is not a problem for sometimes to tune out. That's what we all
Absolutely.
in today's world. I think we all need. Even distractions that help us to tune out is easy if it's managed well and they don't become a habit. They don't sabotage ourselves. But also
Exactly.
very important is to tune in. And I love it how you ask to actually ask, what is it trying to tell me? And really listen to the answers. That
Yeah.
all the answers are there.
And be open and to be open to whatever the answer is. So often I also see that clients don't want it to be this answer or that answer, right? They don't want it to be that they need more sleep, or they don't want it to be that they need a more nutritious diet, right? So I think part of that too is yes, listening for the answer and being open to whatever answer comes up and then moving forward without judgment.
Yes, and that's a big thing, and especially without judgment. We
Mhm.
so very easily judge ourselves, criticize ourselves,
Mhm.
put ourselves down.
Yes.
So, very important. Thank you for sharing that. And for anyone who is watching or listening, I hope you, in taking this in, re-watch this episode, listen to it again, and click on the links below to reach out to Laura to help you if you have any habit that is sabotaging your life. It's time now to allow the universe, allow people like Laura to help you undo the habits. Thank you.
Yeah.
What about, I'd love to know, with when we're on our journey of really changing habits, okay,
Mhm.
but what are some warning signs that people might be sabotaging their own progress without even realizing?
The biggest thing that I see where people are sabotaging their progress without even realizing it is lacking self-compassion. And so here's what I mean by that. We talked about these behaviors as a regulation tool, right? And so the more dysregulated we are, the more these behaviors feel the need, so to speak, to come into play to help regulate us. And when we get stuck criticizing ourselves or shaming or blaming ourselves, we actually add to that dysregulation. Those things are in our head, but it really isn't any different from somebody outside of us talking down on us and telling us how terrible we are and how we should have changed this thing by now. And so we can't quite get away from ourselves as easily as we can get away from another person, but it has the same effect on us. It's incredibly dysregulating. And so basically, when we shame and blame ourselves, we add fuel to the fire and we give the behavior or the habit more work to do because we're increasing the dysregulation. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I see where people are unknowingly blocking their own progress, getting in the way of their own progress for change.
We don't realize the little things. You don't,
Mhm.
the little steps that you're able to take and really to congratulate yourself on the little wins instead,
Absolutely.
instead people in general. I think it's so much easier to blame and shame and criticize ourselves for a little setback.
Mhm.
Be a little setback when, and we make it so huge instead of really focusing on the wins, what we have been able to achieve. So yes,
Yes. Yeah.
blaming and shaming is a huge thing. Thank, thank you so,
Yeah. Yeah. And
so
I'd also like to add the blaming and shaming, while we tend to think of it as a negative thing, and yes, it can hold us back, a lot of times people ask me, why do I do this? And I like to explain that the reason why we do that is there's some part of us that thinks that if it shames us or blames us or makes us feel bad, it thinks that it'll help us do better in the future. And while that's not true, I think it's helpful, just like we talked about those emotions, right? The shaming and blaming, that's embarrassment, shame, those are just other emotions. And so leaning in and even asking those negative voices in our head, what are you trying to do for me? How are you trying to help me? And as much as we may not like the answer, a lot of times it is to help us do things differently. Now, I also liken that to a friend who, is trying to help you feel better and they bring you ice cream, or maybe they like throw a surprise birthday party for you when you don't like birthdays. It's a lot like a friend who's really trying to help and just not going about it in a way that's actually helpful. But I think we can even have compassion for those negative thoughts and say, okay, I understand that this thought is trying to help me. This isn't how I want to do it, though. And so I've decided I want to use these other strategies. But I throw that out there because sometimes we look at the shaming and blaming so negatively, and it really does hold us back. But I also like to point out that the underlying purpose of it is that there's a part that's trying to help us. It's just not going about it in a way that's actually helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that and for talking about we do tend to see blame and shame as negative, but we can even turn that around as well.
Yes, we can.
And talking about turning that around is if you could reframe just one belief that people carry around about quitting bad habits, what would that?
Mm. The number one thing I hear is people say, I can't quit because I've been trying and I can't do it. And I really encourage people to reframe that as I haven't found the answer yet, but I'm learning all the time. When we say I can't quit, that closes all the doors, right? Why even try? If it's in your mind that you can't quit, then you're not even going to put forth an honest effort because you've already decided that you can't do it. But if we shift that around to I haven't been able to quit yet, we leave all those doors open, right? There are so many opportunities when we say I haven't been able to do this yet. And when we add on, but I'm learning all the time, that says I keep taking steps in that direction. And so that's the biggest reframe that I think I would suggest.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, just turning it around, knowing that everything does take a little bit of time. And for me, if I can say just even this word trying,
Mhm.
I try to reframe the word
Yeah.
trying because it doesn't really give that power. But I am, however long it's going to take me, but I am and I can and I will. So thank you.
Yes.
I'd love to know more about your business. Let's go into what you
Yes.
actually offer and how you can help people, because I do know that you've got a 12-week program, the Breakthrough
I
Blueprint.
do.
But tell us about your coaching and how do you help your clients identify emotional blocks that keep them stuck?
Yeah. So we start the 12-week program, and there are 8 different modules that we go through. And I've chosen these modules based on the things that I notice keep coming up over and over again for past clients. And so that's how I arrived at these modules. And so we start with noticing, paying attention to, listening to, leaning into the behavior. We start there. And then we look at what needs aren't being met, whether that's physical needs or emotional needs, and we explore what needs aren't being met and how do we meet them better. We also look at regulation tools. How can we bring in regulation strategies that feel good, that we're happy to use, that we're happy to lean on, that don't have such a high cost burden? And then we also look at distress tolerance tools because it's unrealistic to expect that even with all the regulation out there, it's unrealistic to expect that we never get upset. I was just reading a book the other day that talked about the Dalai Lama getting angry sometimes. And so it's unrealistic to expect that we're never going to have emotions that feel uncomfortable. And so how do we plan for that? How do we anticipate that and have tools in our toolbox to manage that? And then we put this all together in this breakthrough blueprint that I'm so excited. And it basically walks people through starting your day. Do you expect any stressors? If you do, let's do this to start off on the right foot. And then if you're at the point where you're experiencing urges, things are getting dysregulated, how do we work through that? How do we de escalate the situation? And sometimes we find ourselves after engaging the behavior, what's done is done. We can't go back. And so, how do we use that as a learning moment? How do we, instead of shaming and blaming ourselves, as we just talked about, how do we say, okay, let me lean into this. Let me learn what went well, what didn't go well. What do I want to do next time? I often like to say, if you could have a do over, what would you do differently? What would you change? And so reframing it as a learning moment. And so that's what we do in the program. And it's been really successful for decreasing these habits, yes. But I think the part that I'm even more proud of for my clients is that everybody walks away with more self compassion. And yes, decreased behaviors, and that's fine. And I don't know that's why they showed up. But I think really the more valuable lasting part is walking away with that self-compassion and the ability to soothe yourself when you're having a rough time.
So very important. The ability to soothe yourself when you're having a rough time, which we all go through. Ken, thank you for sharing that. And you've talked about self-compassion a lot. For you, what's the difference between self-compassion and self-forgiveness? And what
Mm,
role does even forgiveness play in letting go of unwanted habits?
yes. So that's a great question. And the way that I look at it, self-forgiveness is part of self-compassion. In my mind, self-compassion includes self-love and self-acceptance and self-forgiveness and all of these other really warm, fuzzy things. And at least in my mind, how I think about them is that the self-compassion kind of encompasses all of that. And yes, it definitely includes forgiveness. And we talked a lot about shame too, shame and blame. And so that self-forgiveness is when we are able to show up and say, that didn't happen the way that I wanted it to. It didn't, how I responded, or just the situation wasn't aligned with my values and goals. And I'm going to work on being okay with that. I'm going to work on knowing that I am a good person, regardless of whatever happened in this situation. And I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to move forward. And so that's how I look at those things. And I think that all of them are very important. And I think that without them, we stay stuck, whatever it is, whether it is a goal that we are working towards, whether it's a habit that we want to quit, whatever it is, I find that the lack of self-compassion, the lack of self-forgiveness, it keeps us stuck.
Thank you. Thank you, because it really is true. Basically, when we don't really love ourselves, then we get stuck in whatever we're doing, because it comes down to that true deep love, that forgiveness, that compassion for ourselves, the acceptance, as you said, all those words. That can also be holding us back for whatever.
Mhm,
I'd love
yes.
to know, Laura, I'd love to know now, if it's okay, in through your journey with everything that you've been through, what's a daily ritual that helps you to feel grounded and to keep on going with your efforts to grow, to heal, to change, to keep on growing into the wonderful person that you are?
Mm. I think one of the most powerful strategies for me, for daily practice for me, is meditation. And I have meditated off and on in the past, but more recently, I've had a daily practice for nearly a year at this point. And so I think that's really helpful. And even when I can only show up for 5 minutes, if life is just busy and that's what it is, then that's what it is. And when I can show up for longer practices, I do, but I make a point to show up every single day. There's a quote, and I wish I knew where it came from, but it says, everybody should meditate 20 minutes a day, unless you don't have 20 minutes, and then you should meditate for an hour. And I wish I could say where that quote came from, but I really like the idea of, if you don't have enough time to stop and reflect, then we need to reassess your priorities and reassess what's going on, right? If you can't even carve out a little bit of time for yourself. So that's been incredibly helpful for me. And I guess just to expand on how it's been helpful, I found that, and it wasn't a light switch, right? This was a gradual process, but I found that it became easier for me to settle into myself. It became easier for me to go inward and listen to myself. It became easier for me to self-regulate. When something disappointing popped up, it was easier for me to say, that's disappointing, and then figure out what I needed to do next or make those adjustments rather than really getting stuck on it. So I think that meditation practice has been really helpful. I also try to be active when the weather is nice. My husband and I take a walk around our neighborhood. Now, when it gets super cold or super hot, we end up passing for something else, but we really try to walk once or twice a day unless the weather is really nasty. And so I think that's also been a helpful thing. We spend so much time inside, right? And we're just not meant to spend this much time inside. And so getting outside, whether you're walking or just sitting still, can be really regulating and grounding.
Very true. And yes, we're definitely not meant to be sitting in front of computers all day, or just even inside.
Yes.
Like I said, even if it's just getting outside and just standing in the fresh air. Hopefully the sunshine to get our vitamin
Yeah.
D, but if not, just the fresh air helps us
Yeah.
ground and regulate too. Totally.
Yeah. And also being able to look past 10 or 20 feet if the room that you're in is big, even. When we're inside, we're so closed in. And so I think that there's something really powerful about being able to step outside and see how big the world is rather than be contained by these walls that don't give us a lot of space. At least I find personally that's helpful for me.
And for a lot of people. So
Mm.
thank you for sharing that too. Really appreciate, really enjoying this conversation again for anyone out there who is watching or listening. Do replay. And again, click on the links below to reach out to Laura because they're very valuable. And I'd love to know, Laura, before we wrap up, a few little things. We talked about your habit meditation. Thoroughly agree with that. And for me, people say, but I'm too busy. And I say, we always have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Not probably the best place to meditate, but if you can't get away from children, from work,
Yes.
whatever situation it is, we always can take time out
Yes.
in the bathroom. So,
Yes. Start somewhere.
yeah, even like I said, even if it's for 5 minutes, even 1 minute, just
Mhm.
breathing helps us regulate everything and come back
Mhm.
to our center. What
Mhm.
about a mantra? Do you have a personal mantra that you use when things feel a bit challenging, a bit hard?
One that I turn to, and I laugh because I actually have several that are posted up on my wall right here. One that I turn to often is I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best I can with the tools that I have. And if things didn't go the way I would have wanted to, it's not a reflection on me that I'm a bad person. It just means that I haven't gained the tools yet, or the situation still needs something else to be adjusted for me to be successful. But I'm doing the best I can. I find really comforting when I'm going through a tough time.
And it's very true. We're always doing the best that we can in that situation.
Mhm.
Tomorrow can be completely different. We
Mhm.
can go and have a sleep and wake up and it's completely different. But right
Mhm.
now in this situation, totally agree with you that I'm always doing the best that I can. So thank you for
Yeah.
that. I'm going to write that one down too and use it. And if you could give your younger self, especially when you were going through that experience that you explained with your hair, if you could give your
Mhm.
younger self just one message, what would that
Mhm. I think it would be that this behavior is a messenger and not a character flaw. I spent so many years thinking that me pulling my hair out was a character flaw, that I just didn't have the willpower. We talked about willpower, that I didn't have the willpower or whatever else was needed, or honestly, that I was crazy. I remember the first friend that I told, I shared this with her and I asked her afterwards, do you think I'm crazy? Because I really wasn't sure. And so I think I thought it was a character flaw for so long that I would love for the younger version of myself to know that it's a messenger. It's trying to tell you something, but it's not a character flaw.
that thing? It's just trying to tell you something that we can
Mhm.
overcome with all the different techniques that you've shared and that you help people, that we can overcome all the flaws in our character, all the experiences that we've had that have developed into habits that are not quite the best for us. And
Mhm.
if someone has been struggling with a habit for years and feels stuck in that shame loop, what's one thing that you'd like them to hear right now?
Let's see. I would like them to hear that I think it goes back to it's not a character flaw, that you can change. Even if you've been doing this for 20, 30 years or longer, that you can change. There is hope. We just have to get to the root of it and learn what it is that is contributing to this. And I'd also like to add that we talked a lot about hair pulling today because that was the habit that has had the biggest impact on my life. But this really applies for any habits whatsoever, whether it's hair pulling or skin picking or procrastination or stress eating. I have a couple clients that we've worked with procrastination on. That's a big one. One client who is trying to get to bed on time rather than this dysregulated bedtime habit. And so this is true for any habit. I want to encourage listeners to keep in mind that this isn't just for one particular habit and this is how you do it, but this is for any behavior that you're asking yourself, why can't I stop doing this?
Yeah, that's all it is. And it's true, we've got so many habits that do sabotage ourselves. Really
Mhm.
little things, whatever it is. As you said, stress eating, procrastinating, not getting to bed on time. That can be a habit of forcing ourselves awake for whatever.
Phones. We talked about phones.
Oh,
I just had a client the other day that we talked about. She came to me, she said, I think I'm addicted to my phone. And so we're working on strategies to help her with that, but that's a really common one as well.
in today's world, extremely.
Mm,
Devices,
yes.
they weren't there a few years ago.
Mhm.
Now it's something not reasonably new, but they weren't there like 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And now, and because there's so much available, it's very easy to get caught up into it and very easy for that to become a habit that really will sabotage us from where we want to be in our thinking.
Yes. Yes.
So, Laura, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Would love to have another one. But before we do go, is there any other question that I could have asked you?
Yeah, I think we covered the important stuff. The self-compassion is just a really big, I'm very passionate about helping people find self-compassion because it is there within them. Even people who really struggle to find it is there. We just have to uncover it. And so I think we covered a lot of the really important things.
Thank you. It's been an honor. It really has been an
Yeah,
honor. Congratulations on your life of
thank you.
overcoming your habits and now really helping others. To give them
Thank you.
hope. I love your last name, to give them hope and to help them heal whatever is holding them back. Thank you ever so much.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
You're welcome. And I do hope that you will come back to the Pathways to Wellbeing one day very soon. Thank you.
Yes, I'd love that.
Thank you for joining in today and tuning into our conversation with Laura, who shared her journey on breaking free from unwanted habits. Healing happens when you start listening to what your behavior is trying to tell you. Meet yourself with kindness and take that next micro step forward. If you would love to explore Laura's work further, be sure to check out her 12-week coaching program, The Breakthrough Blueprint. It is designed to help you unravel emotional blocks, regulate without relying on sabotage habits, and build a life rooted in self-trust. You will find all the details in the links below. And for more empowering conversations, tools, and strategies, do follow Sacred You on all our social media or visit our website at www.sacredyou, that's the letter U.love. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button or give us a like so that you never miss another episode. In Laura's own words, self-compassion isn't something we need to earn. It's already within us, waiting to be uncovered. Stay grounded, stay inspired, stay connected, and until next time, keep walking your pathway to well-being.